Okay, so Shabbat Shalom, everybody. What did you say? Sorry. Oh, Eddie was asking, are you guys enjoying the recordings and things? So hopefully.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the teaching on Reuben.
Well, good. So thank you. Well, so Shabbat Shalom for those that are here in person, those that are joining us online, and those who are watching later, coming in. And this week's portion is going to be Vayigash. And let me slide this to the side. We are going to start. Give me just a second. There we go. Okay, so we are starting this week's Parsha, Vayigash, in Genesis 44 and verse 18. Okay, so 44:18. And this Parsha holds the revelation of Joseph to his brothers. It's also about Joseph being able to provide bread to sustain the house of Israel during the time of famine. And, you know, within this Torah portion, there are so many prophetic pictures. And of course, we definitely aren't going to scratch the surface with all the prophetic pictures there, but there's so many different pictures that we can see and dwell on. And, you know, part of, I guess I would title it Prophetic Pictures Revealed, because there's so many that we're going to see in this parsha. So we start off in Genesis 44 and verse 18, and this parsha is called Vayigash. And Vayigash means to draw near or to offer or to present. And so when we look and see who is actually drawing near here, it's Judah. And remember in last week's portion, Parsha, it was, it ended with Benjamin, Joseph's silver cup was found in Benjamin's sack. And so Yehuda now is taking on the role of a leader, and he's the one who goes about pleading here with Joseph. So let's go to Genesis 44 and verse 18. And it starts, Then Yehuda approached Joseph and said, Please, my lord, let your servant say something to you privately, and don't be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. So notice that, he's saying that, he's drawing close or coming near. And that's the word Vayigash, where we get the name of this parsha. But the root of that is Nagash. And it's a little different than, because we've talked about drawing near before, and it is karov, and here we have a different word. It is nagash. So I want to go back to the first time we actually see this root nagash, and it's back in Genesis 18. So let's go to Genesis 18. And I'm going to start in verse 22. Okay, so Genesis 18:22. The men turned away from there and went towards Sodom. But Abraham remained standing before Yah. And Abraham approached Vayigash, and he said, Will you actually sweep away the righteous with the wicked? So look at what's happening here. When we see the first occurrence of this root, it is when Abraham is drawing near to Yah. And, basically it's meaning that he was pleading or interceding for the righteous not to be destroyed along with the unrighteous. So, he knew, that Yah was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And so this word nagash is, when it's talking about drawing near, it is talking about intercession. And so this parsha begins with Yehuda basically drawing near to Joseph, which he doesn't know as Joseph, but he is drawing near or interceding with Joseph. And, like I said, there are so many prophetic pictures that are portrayed in this parsha, and we're going to see that they have dual meanings in many places, and that you're going to see many things revealed. And one of the themes that we have in this portion is that something that was hidden is going to be revealed. And we know that we're also going to see the theme of something that was lost is going to be restored, and also intercession. So all of this is going to happen in this parsha. And so this word Vayigash is written in Hebrew Vav, which numerically is 6. Okay. Yud, which is 10, or the Yod, which is 10. Gimel, which is 3. And Shin, which is 300. So Vayigash numerically is 319. And there's an interesting link because with a different passage that we see in the Tanakh, and this is one that we talk about all the time when we're talking about intercession. So let's go over to 2 Chronicles chapter 7. Okay. 2 Chronicles chapter 7. And we're going to go down to verse 14. Then, if my people who bear my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their evil ways, I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land. And so when we look at that, we're talking about, he is going, where this step is interceding. Okay. Not only that, but if you look at it, it actually is giving us sort of the steps of intercession. What should we do first? We should humble ourselves. We should pray. We should seek Yah's face and turn from our wicked ways. And, many of us a lot of times will pray and we'll say we're seeking his face, but are we really doing all these steps? Are we really humbling ourselves? Are we really turning from our wicked ways? So, it's all tied in with drawing near and interceding, that we need to do all of those things. And how it's linked in is where it says, humble ourselves and turn from our wicked ways. The word in Hebrew here is midarkim. Midarkim is spelled mem, which is a value of 40, dalet, which is a value of 4, resh, 200, and then kaf, 20, yud or yod, 10, and then hey, 5, and a final mem, which is 40, which also has 319. So that word Vayigash for our drawing near is the same numerical value as the phrase midarkim, which means to turn from our ways. So if we're drawing near to him, then we're turning from those ways, those wicked ways. And this made me think of the verse in James chapter 5. James chapter 5, I'm going to go to verse 16. And it says, therefore, openly acknowledge your sins to one another and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. And so, we think about sometimes, a righteous man here, he's going to turn from his ways and his prayers are going to be powerful and effective. And that's, another reason why it's so important for us to be a body, to gather together and to, lift each other up and to encourage each other and, to not, be a judge over them, but to, come before each other, with a humbleness and, if we have sin against another to, confess it and to get that right. And so, another thing that stuck out with me is that who is drawing near is Yehuda. He's humbling himself. And, he's the, basically that word, mikardim, which is to turn from his wicked ways here. You think about all the wickedness he had done to Joseph, with selling him. And now we see him, coming before Joseph, even though he doesn't know it's Joseph. And he is basically, showing that he's repented, that he's turning from those ways. So, okay, so let's go back to the Parsha, and we were in Genesis 44. And I'm going to go down to the next verse, which is 19. So we got through one verse here. Look at what he said. He says, my Lord asked his servants, do you have a father or a brother? Okay, so he's asking about, do you have a father or a brother here? And Joseph knows they have a brother still. Okay, and look at what Yehuda says. We answered my Lord and said, we have a father who is an old man and a child of his old age, a little one whose brother is dead, so that his mother's children, he alone is left, and his father loves him. So, Yehuda is saying that Benjamin is still alive and his father, Yaakov, is still alive, but Benjamin's brother, which is Joseph, is dead. So Yehuda is talking to Joseph about Joseph, but why does he say he's dead? Yeah, he doesn't recognize him. Well, because he was the young one. So he was the young one. He wasn't necessarily, a little baby or anything, but he was still a child to them in their eyes too. And to think about, you got to think about, I think part of the reason that he says Joseph is dead is if we look at the next verse. Look at what the next verse says. He says that in verse 21, he says, but you said to your servant, bring him down to me so that I can see him. He's talking about Benjamin. And so I think, part of why Yehuda is saying that Joseph is dead, because he was probably afraid that this ruler, which, he doesn't know is Joseph, the Pharaoh's servant here, he would want to see his other brother, and they couldn't produce him, so he wouldn't be able to produce him. So he's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So how would Yehuda explain that we sold our brother into slavery? And so he couldn't really explain it. So he says, oh, he's dead. And he probably thinks he probably is dead. And, again, there's another prophetic picture being revealed, because Yehuda is seeing Joseph as dead. Well, who is Joseph a picture of?
Wow.
Yeshua, the Mashiach. Okay. Well, who is Yehuda? Judah, Jews. And so what are they doing? They see Joseph, the Mashiach, as dead. And so, wow. That's a whole prophetic picture that's being played out here. And think about what's going to happen a little bit farther, because we know the story that Joseph, who basically is considered dead, is going to be resurrected in this. So.
Here all the time. I forgot. Joseph had already there was a lot of changing in his brothers because of them saying what they did about their
father. She's just saying that, all those like 13 years or more that they have been, Joseph had been in Egypt, that there was a lot of changes that she believes was going on with Yehuda and his family. And,
they're not treating Benjamin.
They're not treating Benjamin the same way that they had treated Joseph. So I think they did. I think that was part of the word here that's in, he was saying, do you think they really ever really regretted selling him? And I think part of it is that they, are going to, when we see this revelation happen, that it is actually coming out that they're going to mourn for him. And, even talking about Yeshua, the prophecy with Yeshua, where it says that they will, when they mourn him as a son, that was pierced. Yeah. Yeah.
I think too, that's one of the reasons that Joseph is testing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was just saying that that's one reason that Joseph is testing them, is to see whether or not they had really changed. Did the brothers' hearts really change toward, how they were? Were they changing toward Benjamin now? Were they going to treat him the same way they treated Joseph? And to think about, here is Yehuda, and he's standing before this, what's probably the most powerful man on the earth at that time, besides, Pharaoh. And they see him as this Gentile king, and they don't recognize him as their brother. And so how Joseph is being portrayed to his brothers, he's dressed like an Egyptian, he's shaved, he looks like an Egyptian, he's probably, wearing some of the makeup and stuff that they had. He's probably got a shaved head, he doesn't have a beard, he's wearing those garments. So how he was being portrayed to his brothers is not really bringing revelation and restoration to the family. It's basically misrepresenting what is true. It's in a way misrepresenting the gospel. Because if we were representing Yeshua as he truly is, as this, Jewish man who looks like a Jew, who didn't come to change Torah, he came to show us the way to walk it out truthfully, and that he was wearing zits, and he's probably got these PO, these earlocks, these like a Jewish man, like an Orthodox Jewish man. He's probably going to wear a zit here. So when we see him, if we're representing Yeshua how he truly is, then maybe Yehuda would recognize their own brother, and that misrepresentation of him is basically standing in the way of the restoration. And I think that's probably part of the problem with most of these organizations, is in essence they're misrepresenting who he is, and that doesn't really bring about true restoration between the brothers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the ones who did were, a small amount. Yeah, he was just saying that even when Yeshua was walking the earth, there was just a small amount that recognized Yeshua as being the Messiah. There wasn't a large majority, but we got to remember that those first believers that were there were, Jews. Okay, so let's go through the next verse, Genesis 44. I'm going to give him verse 22. And when he answered, my Lord, the boy can't leave his father. If he were to leave his father would die. And you said to your servants, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. And we went up to your servant, my father, and we told him what my Lord had said. But when our father said, go again and buy us some food, we answered, we cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us will we go down, because we can't see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons, the one that went out from me. And I said, surely he's been torn to pieces, and I haven't seen him since. Now, if you take this one away from me too, something happens to him, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol with grief. So now if I go to your servant, my father, and the boy isn't with us, seeing how my heart is bound up with the boy's heart, When he sees that the boy isn't with us, he will die. And your servants will bring the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to Sheol with grief. And for your servant himself guaranteed his safety. And I said, if I fail to bring him to you, then I will bear the blame before my father forever. Therefore, I beg you, let your servant stay a slave to my Lord instead of the boy, and let the boy go up with his brothers. So, look at what he's doing here. Here we've got, Yehuda, and he's pleading, let me be the one to stay. And he says, for how can I go up to my father if the boy isn't with me? I could not bear to see my father so overwhelmed with anguish. And so, Joseph is telling them that the only way you're going to see me, that the only way, you're going to be able to come back here is if you bring Benjamin. And so remember, Benjamin's name means son of my right hand. So it's only with the son of the right hand that Joseph's face is going to be revealed to Israel. And Ephesians 1 and verse 20 tells us that when he worked in the Messiah to raise him from the dead and seat him at the right hand in heaven. So it tells us that the Mashiach is at the right hand. So it is Yehuda's, Joseph is saying that it's only with Benjamin that this is going to happen, that you're going to be able to see me again. And so it is with the son of the right hand, it is with the Mashiach that Joseph is actually revealing himself to Israel, his brothers. And notice that, in that passage that I just read, it said that Yehuda said that Benjamin's life is bound up with the life of his father. So Benjamin's life is bound with Yaakov. So in other words, the son of the right hand is bound with the father. Well, what does John 10 and 30 say? Yeshua say, I and the Father are one. They're bound together. And that's the same thing that this picture is saying here with Benjamin and the Father, that they are bound, they are one. That was in 44 verse 30, Yehuda tells Joseph that Yaakov's nephesh, his soul, is kashar. It's tied to Benjamin's nephesh. So if Benjamin doesn't go back to the father, Yaakov or Israel is going to die. And so as a result of Yehuda's recognition, he recognizes that there's this tie between Benjamin and the father. And so Yehuda becomes a guarantee for Benjamin. And so Yehuda takes responsibility for Benjamin's actions, or not really Benjamin's actions, but, he's saying, okay, I'm going to take responsibility. And he tells, Yaakov, I'm going to bring him back to you. And so Yehuda is displaying those leadership qualities. He's actually taken personal responsibility for his people and being a leader there. And, it's interesting why Yehuda does it. He doesn't really do it for his own sake, but it's out of love for his father. So if we think about, this too has a prophetic meaning, because Yehuda represents the house of Judah. And Yehuda is standing, before the father as a guarantee until all Israel returns. He's being the leader. He's taking responsibility. And it's because of the love that he has for the father that he's doing that, which I believe is what's causing him to repent, because he has seen how much, what he did hurt his father. And that is part of why he's repenting. And to think about too, well, where's Benjamin? Benjamin is with the father. Well, wait a minute. Okay. If the son of the right hand is with the father and the life is bound together, then Benjamin has to descend or come down to Egypt for the revelation to take place. Well, Benjamin, a picture of Yeshua, has got to descend in order for the revelation to take place. So, lots of prophetic pictures. Okay. Another thing I wanted to point out here too is, talking about intercession, this is Joseph interceding, and then Joseph is a type and picture of Mashiach. And here, this is basically Mashiach ben Yosef. It's not the Mashiach ben David. Okay. And when we look at the phrase Mashiach ben Yosef, okay, and numerically, Mashiach, Mem is 40, Shin 300, Yod is 10, and Het 8. Beit is 2, and Nun is 50. And then Yosef is Yod 10, Vav 6, Samek 60, and then the Fe or Pei is 80. So Mashiach ben Yosef is actually 566. And he is basically, Joseph is hidden in this cloak, this garment of paganism, really, because he's dressed as an Egyptian. Okay. But this phrase, Mashiach ben Yosef, 566, is the exact same value that we see Moshe referring to one of the names of Mashiach. If we go over to Moshe's blessing in Deuteronomy 36 or 33, verse 26, and this is the blessing that he gives over Asher. In Deuteronomy 33 and verse 26, he says, Yeshurun, there is no one like El or Elohim, riding through the heavens to help you, riding on the clouds in his majesty. And so Yeshurun is actually one of the names of the Mashiach, and he's described here as an El, a God, and look how he's coming. Okay, he's coming in the heavens, in the sky, riding in majesty. And so how prophetic is this picture when we think about this is the same value? Yeshurun is the same value as the Mashiach ben Yosef, and how they're linked together. And we think about, if you go to Revelation chapter 1, we can see this in reference to Yeshua. In Revelation 1 and verse 7, it says, look, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, including those who pierced him. And all of the tribes of the land will mourn him. Yes and amen. So it's, talking about how he is coming. He's going to be coming in those clouds and in the sky. And we also see that in Revelation 19, in verse 11, it says, next I saw heaven open, and there before me was a white horse, and the one sitting on it was called Faithful and True, and it is in righteousness that he passes judgment and goes to battle. His eyes are like a fiery flame, and on his head were many royal crowns, and he had a name which no one knew but himself. And he was wearing a robe that has been soaked in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God, or the Word of Elohim. And so, like I said, these prophecies have more than one application. And, so far we've really been focusing on, the main three characters here are Joseph, Benjamin, and Yehuda. And all three of those at some point give us a glimpse of Yeshua. And I think Joseph is a picture of the Mashiach's first coming, because the Mashiach ben Yosef we think about Yeshua ben Yosef, he's going to appear to be hidden under these pagan garments, and Yehuda doesn't recognize him. And that, we think about today, we've got Jews who don't recognize Yeshua because what? Because of the way the church and Constantine has hidden the true Mashiach under these garments of the pagans, and say that he's done away with all of these things in Torah, and he's changed the holidays and he's changed stuff, and that's not what the Mashiach is doing. And after his first coming, we see him, what happens, that we see Yeshua is being described as seated at the right hand of the Father. Well, he's the son of the right hand. Which son of the right hand is Benjamin. And so Benjamin is also a picture of Yeshua. And Benjamin was what? He was hidden. He was with the Father, and he wasn't seen, when the brothers first come down to Egypt, because he's with the Father. And as Yeshua is with the Father, and he's unseen right now. And then we see, Yehuda comes along. And Yehuda comes to, basically, he's coming down to Egypt to save his people. He's coming to get the food, to buy bread. And Yehuda is what? He's the progenitor. He's the one that's through the line which David is going to be born, which Yeshua is the son of David. So when Yeshua comes again, he's going to be like the Mashiach ben David. And so all this time, you've got all these different pictures that are being revealed just by looking at the different levels of interpretation here. It's not just one level, the literal, the Peshat. We've talked before about the Pardes, where we have the Peshat, the Remes, the Drash, and the Sod levels. And so each one of those, when you start looking, there's different layers of who each one of these people can represent at that time. So
in the situation that of the brothers,
Mhm.
and they were talking to Joseph, usually the oldest one, the firstborn, speaks,
Right.
which is Reuben.
Right.
Simeon is in prison there, but Reuben is, but Judah walked up. Now Reuben spoke to his father, but Judah did, and then Judah's speaking to Pharaoh. Now is that record?
And she said, why? Because Judah's taken on the leadership role. She was just saying, well, usually it's the firstborn that's the one that's being the leader here. But remember what happened with Reuben. And so Reuben loses that firstborn status, and it moves to basically being split between Yehuda and Joseph. Joseph actually gets the firstborn rights, the double blessing, but then Yehuda gets the kingship and Levi gets the priesthood. So Yehuda is the one who's taken up that role as being the kingly leader, and he's the one who's addressing.
Yeah, because Reuben spoke to his father.
Yes.
But I noticed that to Joseph, it was Judah.
It's Judah. Yeah, it's Judah, the one who's really doing it. Okay, so let's go to Genesis 45. It says, at last, no longer, Joseph could control his feelings in front of his attendants, and he cried, get everyone away from me. And so that no one else was with him when Joseph revealed to his brothers who he was. He wept aloud, and the Egyptians heard, and Pharaoh's household heard. And Joseph said to his brothers, Ani Joseph, I am Joseph. Is it true that my father is still alive? His brothers couldn't answer him. They were so dumbfounded at seeing him. So, think about how they must have felt when they really realized this is Joseph. And, I was thinking about it, and I think, wait a minute. This reunion between Joseph and his brother is taking place outside of the promised land. It's happening in Egypt. Is that's what's happening, that the house of Yehuda and the house of Joseph are coming together outside of the promised land. We see that happening in a lot of Messianic congregations. You have brother Yehuda and Joseph coming together already. And I think that's a big part that comes into play before entering the land.
I noticed too on that.
Mhm.
Joseph and Miriam, Yeshua's mother,
Mhm.
Joseph was fine, but he took over the role as a earthly father.
Mhm.
So there was Joseph, and the Lord spoke to him through a messenger, telling him to bring his son back out of Egypt.
Yeah.
You know, so Joseph knew to leave Egypt and bring him out. And that's so, I mean, to me, I think, whoa, that's, you know.
And she was just making the parallel when, Yeshua's parents had went down to Egypt, and then the angel spoke to them about, to bring his son out, to bring Yeshua out of Egypt to there too. It's that this is, they're going to be in Egypt. And so it's like this reunion that's taking place between the two houses are happening while they're in Egypt before coming really into the land. But they're not all there, because remember, Yaakov is still in the land. And, another thing that stuck out was Joseph is revealing himself in private. He got all of the servants, everybody else to leave. And when he's making himself known to his brothers, and, it's happening. When does he do this? It's happening during a time of famine and trouble. And, remember in Amos 8 and 11, and it's talking about the last days. And Amos 8 and 11, it's talking about that there's going to come a time, says Yah, when I'm going to send a famine over the land, not a famine of bread or thirst for water, but of hearing the words of Yah. And that last day famine is going to be really for the literal bread of Yah, not necessarily the physical bread.
That's hearing the word or hearing the truth.
Oh, he was just asking, what do you think that's really asking, about hearing the word or hearing the truth of the word? Good question. What do you think?
I mean, because the truth is really clouded right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. He said, I think it's really talking about hearing the truth of the word, because, a lot of times you can go and we've been taught the word, we talk about how these churches are, say they're teaching the word, but are they really teaching the truth of the word? Yeah. Or congregations, messianics, whoever. And they're changing things. Yeah. Is it the word, the truth really being heard? Well, what is truth? Psalms 119, 142 says that your Torah is truth. So, even in Jeremiah 30 and 7, it says how dreadful that day will be. There's never been one like it, which is a time of trouble for Yaakov, but out of it, he will be saved. And you think about what's happening, well, if you link it with Amos 8, that there's going to be this famine. Well, just like there was a famine in the land, and that Yaakov and them had to be saved. Well, how were they saved? They had to go to Egypt, and Joseph revealed himself to his brothers.
It was famine of fruit and nuts, all that. It was only the bread.
Yeah.
The word, and basically,
Yeah, we talked about that last week, is that, it wasn't, when you think about a complete famine, how it started out, because they did still have, fruit and honey. It talks about Dabash, they had honey there and stuff, because even Jacob tells them when they were leaving to go down to Egypt to take these things with them to present them. Sorry, my nose is itching. Okay, so Joseph, being a picture of Messiah, Yeshua, reveals himself to his brothers alone. And, I think that's how he's going to do it in the end times. He's going to reveal himself to brother Yehuda, those who are having that open heart at the end times. And just like the rest of Egypt didn't really know what was going on, the rest of the world really aren't going to know what's going on here. They're going to be oblivious to what's really happening.
Well, you look what's happening now in Israel. So many people that are Jewish are hearing the word, hearing the Lord. I mean, it's coming to them and speaking to them.
Yeah, and she was just talking about how, we're here, we hear stories and stuff about, different people that are, in Israel that are going back to the word. They're going back to Torah. They're actually getting back they're getting into congregations. They're seeking out believers. So, and you do see that, especially because of the war and things that are happening, that, hearts are being softened. And that was, I know, Levi, who, just got out of his service, in Israel. One of the things that he was talking about during this time, when he was stationed on the Lebanese border, was that it was, he really was praying that Yah soften their hearts. That was one of his prayers, is that, throughout this whole thing that's going on, Yah soften, my brother's hearts so that they can see you. And so I think, part of that prayer is being answered. Okay. And 45, Genesis 45 and verse 6. Notice here it says, the famine has been over the land for the last 2 years, and yet another 5 years there will be neither plowing nor harvest. So at this point, it has been 2 years into the famine, and they still have 5 more years to go. And, these numbers have meaning. And so we see basically the numbers 2 and 5 sticking out here. Well, the number 2 in Hebrew is the bait, the house. So, this is really pointing us to the house. Well, 5 in Hebrew is the number Hay, and Hay is a picture of the Ruach, his spirit. And it's also a picture of grace, his Torah, being grace. And so 2 and 5, we really see in scripture being pointing to about him extending his grace to his house. And so Yah is extending his grace to his house during this time of famine prior to the revelation that was going to come. And it's in the time of famine and tribulations that he's doing that. And if you remember the story, even in the Brit Hadashah, about the 2 and the 5, in Mark chapter 6, in verse 38, when they were there, feeding the 5,000, on the Mount of Beatitudes, and he asked them, well, how many loaves do you have? Go and check. And when they found out, they said, oh, we got 5. Well, how many fish do you have? 2. And so here again, this feeding of the 5,000 on the Mount of Beatitudes, Capernaum here, was about extending grace to his house. So that's another 2 and 5. And there's another picture of 2 and 5 if we go to the book of Jeremiah. In the temple, Jeremiah 5 in verse 22. Oh, maybe it's not 5 and 22. Wait a second. Let me see.
52:22.
Yeah. Yeah, 52:22. Sorry. Jeremiah 52:22. It says that I'm talking about the temple, that on the capital of brass, 8 3/4 feet high, with netting and pomegranates all around the capital, and all of bronze. The second column was similar, all with pomegranates. So in the temple, there were these 2 pillars, and each one had a capital on it, those little ornament things at the top, and they were 5 cubits each. And so you have the 2 pillars, and they both have these 5 cubits on it. And these 2 pillars were at the entrance to the, his presence. And so it's another picture of Yah extending his grace so that his house, his people, could get into his presence. And, how do we get into the temple? Is by the true revelation of Joseph. It's not by the misrepresentation there. So, okay, so going back to the Parsha in Genesis 45 in verse 12, we see that what Joseph says. He says, here, Your own eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it's my own mouth speaking to you. So, Joseph is saying that it's his own mouth, meaning that he's talking to them in Hebrew, in their native language. So as they're, because before he was talking to them through an interpreter. And so, now they're trying to put everything together and understand this is really Joseph standing before us. Go back a few verses, and I want to look at verse 7 here. Look at what it says in verse 7. Oops.
To an Egyptian
translate. Yes.
The Hebrew,
yeah, he was using a
Aramaic.
translator, and they were translating it for him. Yeah. If you go back to verse 7, look at what he says in verse 7. It says, and Joseph says, Elohim sent me ahead of you to ensure that you will have descendants on the earth and to save your lives in a great deliverance. So, and here, when we read that, in Hebrew, it says that Elohim has sent me before you to place a remnant, a sherit, in the earth. And so Joseph is saying that the reason I came is I came, so that to Egypt here, so I would make sure that a remnant, a sherit, would be delivered. And what is Yeshua going to do? He's going to deliver at the end the remnant to the Father. And like I said, Joseph doesn't reveal himself to all of Egypt at this time. He only does it to his brothers. Okay. And
was this the starting of the remnant that God had planned for Joseph being in Egypt to have the Hebrews there? Was they not any? I'm not Hebrew, that's the language, but I mean, like Jews, Israel.
the people,
Yeah.
well, there's still going to be some, but they come out of Egypt. You remember, but it's going to be 210 years.
So
Yeah.
Still, this was like preserving.
It's preserving their life. Yeah.
Egypt
Because what would happen, Egypt had all the grain. What would have happened is they would have died out in the land because of the famine that was going on too.
They
Because
probably had fruit, but not bread.
But still
like
over a
bread,
period of
right.
time, they would have gone, because even that wouldn't have gone, because I think it started, the grain, when you think about, you still have some fruit trees that will produce or whatever, but then and then they end up selling those off and then eating those, and the animals are gone, and then what do you have left? You're still not, able to grow and harvest things, so.
Because there's more than just lambs, there was cattle. Out,
Right. Mm-hmm. So Joseph, like I said, is a picture of Yeshua, and then sometimes he is a picture of the house of Joseph or Ephraim. And sometimes, we can look at it that it on one level, it's just Joseph and his family, the literal Pashat level, what's happening. So there's so many different levels that, like I said, we can't pick apart all of them, but just be aware that they are there, and, you may see something different than what I saw there, and you see another level. So, okay, so let's keep going in Genesis 45, and I'm going to skip down just to verse 21. Okay. The sons of Israel acted accordingly, and Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had ordered, and he gave them provisions for the journey. So this is when he's, sending things back to Yaakov. And to each one of them, he gave a set of new clothes. But to Benjamin, he gave 7.5 pounds of silver, 5 sets of new clothes. And likewise to his father, he sent 10 donkeys loaded with the finest goods Egypt produced, as well as 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and food for his father to eat on the return journey. Thus he sent his brothers on their way, and they left. And he said to them, don't quarrel among yourselves while you're traveling. Think about that. Yeah, you're all the brothers. You're probably going to get into some arguments along the way. Please don't argue while you're going on your way, because they are brothers after all. So think about Joseph gave them all new clothing. So basically, clothing is a change in status. But to Benjamin, he gave him, and I read it in pounds there, but it says he gave him 300 pieces of silver. Well, silver represents redemption. And 300 is actually the numerical value of the word kafar, which is ransom. And so, and that's, where we get the word kafar, the root kafar is where we get the word kippur from, like the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippurim. And so this 300 is also the value of El Shaddai. So when he's given Benjamin this picture of these 300 pieces of silver, it's symbolizing the redemption, but it's also symbolizing the ransom or atonement or the Yom Kippur offering. And it's also symbolizing that it's El Shaddai, which is what? A picture of Yeshua, that all of that's pointing to him being Yeshua. And he also gave Benjamin what? 5 sets of clothing. Well, 5, again, is a picture of the Torah. All right, so Benjamin is basically the atonement price and the Torah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that the whole reason Joseph did, yeah. Well, he revealed himself that, he's already revealed himself here. Yeah, she was just saying, Joseph is the whole purpose so that he would bring Jacob back. Yes, I think that's, why he's doing it. He's wanting to bring his father there. So, and notice that it says to Yaakov, Joseph gave 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt. He gave him 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and other provisions. Well, 10 signifies completion and multiplication, but it also, 10 is a picture of the tribes, and it's also, a prophetic picture of the house of, Joseph, that ends up going astray and ends up going into captivity. And so he's giving him this grain, together with this grain, the bread is a picture of the Torah or his word, so basically Yaakov is showing, or Joseph is trying to show Yaakov that I am alive and that I have the bread, I have the Torah still, and that we're going to, and I've remembered, my brothers, the 10, I'm remembering all of them too during this time, that I didn't forget them. So I think it was, a multiple thing there that he's trying to show his dad, I didn't forget my family. I didn't forget where I came from or the Torah or what you taught me.
And I think you have to split it up because in God's plan, they all have to come back out together.
Yeah.
And that's why he said go, and then they here, and he sent proof of who he was.
Yeah, he's like sending proof of who he was, so that getting them all there, so that, and then they all come out together. Yeah, he could have split them and said part of them back into the land. That they would be, well, it says that, he told Abraham that there were going to be 400 years that they were going to actually be persecuted, which would have been from the time of the covenant, but then they were actually in Egypt. We'll go into that in a later Parsha, but about 210 years.
He thought when we found out that
Yeah, well, okay, that's where we're getting ready to get to. Okay. Yeah, what did Yaakov think when he, tell me. Okay, so let's go there where we keep going where he actually, he doesn't, get on to his other kids. Yeah, they did lie to him. Okay, in Genesis 45 and verse 25, and it says, and they went up out of Egypt and entered the land of Canaan and came to Yaakov, their father. And they told him, Joseph is still alive, and he's ruler over the whole land of Egypt. And Yaakov was stunned at the news, and he couldn't believe it. Well, I probably wouldn't believe it either if you're saying it. One, you're saying he's alive, but two, you're now saying that he's the ruler over Egypt. Yeah. Yeah, because they already brought, the brothers brought the cloak saying he's dead, then this cloak, it's got blood on it. Yeah. Okay, so verse 27, and so they reported to him everything that Joseph had said to them, but it was only when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry that the spirit of Yaakov, their father, began to revive. And Israel said, enough, my son Joseph is still alive, and I must go and see him before I die. So, as the brothers are telling him the story, Yaakov, doesn't really believe them at first, but then it says he does believe them, but he doesn't believe them until he sees the carts. So Joseph had to send something that causes Yaakov to really understand that what they were saying was true. And I know, Ardell Bodie had pointed out in her commentary that there was something important about these carts. Yeah, there's got to be some kind of sign on it. And if you think for a minute, okay, here's a man, Yaakov, whose life has revolved around the covenant. Would he have been excited to realize that my son's a pagan leader?
No.
I mean, here I am thinking, okay, one, he's dead, but now you're thinking my son's a pagan leader, so what is it about these carts that caused his spirit to revive? And, these were more than just simple wagons. These would have belonged to Pharaoh because, he worked for Pharaoh here. And so they're going to have a royal symbol on these carts. But if we go to Genesis 45 and verse 17, notice what it says here. It says, Pharaoh said to Joseph, tell your brothers, here's what you are to do. Load up your animals and go to the land of Canaan and take your father and your families and come back to me. I will give you good property in Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land. Moreover, this is an order. Do this. Take wagons from the land of Egypt to carry your little ones and your wives and bring them to your father and come. Okay. So here we see, Pharaoh's telling him to do that. But then we go down to verse 27, and it says, and so they reported everything Joseph had said, but it was only when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him that the spirit of Yaakov, their father, began to revive. So, and, the first part, it says that these carts were sent by Pharaoh, but then in verse 27, we see that these carts are being sent by Joseph. So, it seems to imply that Joseph did something to these carts to show that the ownership had changed, or there was some sort of message here. And the sages say that this is a wordplay, because the word for a cart, like the little cart I used to drag up the hill in Israel to carry my groceries, a lot of times is called an agalah. Okay. And agalah is spelled Ayin Gimel Lamed He. An agalah. And the word for heifer, like the cow, is eglah. Okay. Ayin Gimel Lamed He. And remember that before Joseph was sold, he was 17 years old. He had spent a lot of that time in his father's tent studying Torah. And the sages believe that, Joseph wanted to reassure his father, not only did I survive and thrive here in Egypt, but I remain faithful to what you taught me. I remain faithful to that Torah that you taught me. And that the sages actually link this wordplay, because remember in Hebrew on a Torah scroll, you would not have the nikadot, these Hebrew dashes and dots that tell you how to pronounce the word. So Ayin Gimel Lamed Hey could be read instead of Agalah as Eglah that he would have seen. And there is in scripture something called the Eglah Arafah, which is the decapitated calf. And that's in Deuteronomy 21. In Deuteronomy 21, yeah, I think this might be the sign that he had there, that it was a sign for his dad of what happened. Because in Deuteronomy 21, and I'm going to start in verse 1, notice what this is talking about. If in the land which Yah is giving you to possess, okay, where was Yaakov and the sons living at the time? In the land, okay. A murder victim is found lying in the countryside and the perpetrator of the murder victim is not known. Then your leaders and your judges are to go out and to measure the distance between it and the surrounding towns. After it has been determined which town is the closest, the leaders of that town are to take a young female flock cow that has never been put to yoke or yoked for use as a draft animal. And the leaders of that town are to bring the heifer down to the wadi with a stream in it that never dries up, to a place that is neither plowed nor sown. And they are to break the cow's neck there in the wadi. And then the Kohanim, who are Levi'im, are to approach, for Yah your Elohim has chosen them to serve him and to pronounce blessings in the name of Yah. And they will decide the outcome of every dispute and matter involving violence. And all the leaders of the town nearest the murder victim are to wash their hands over the cow whose neck was broken in the wadi. In verse 7, and they are to speak up and say, this blood was not shed by our hands, nor have we seen who did it. And Yah, forgive the people of Israel whom you redeemed. Do not allow innocent blood to be shed among your people Israel, and they will be forgiven this bloodshed. And thus you will banish the shedding of innocent blood from among you by doing what Yah sees as right. So, this sounds sort of shocking, but that was the point. The reason for it was to teach the community that you have all a responsibility toward each other in the community, and that the elders were declared that they were innocent of this and that they didn't shed the blood. So if there was somebody passing by through your village or whatever, and they found this murder victim, how do you know that you didn't do this? They would take this calf and it would kill it. And it had to be one that was unworked, which would symbolize someone that is young or innocent. They were free of sin. And that this person was murdered not due to a fault of their own. And so I think, part of the sign that Joseph is sending on these carts, because, he did something to change it from Pharaoh's cart to his cart, and that he was sending this eglah, this cow, on it to show his dad, oh, I remember the Torah that you taught me, and that I'm not holding my brothers responsible, because what were they accused of? They were accused of basically murdering me and selling me into slavery.
Yeah, and so his father really didn't know.
No, he didn't. No, yeah, he just thought he was dead. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Reuben's the one who said, don't kill him. Yeah, when he was going to go back for him. But he wasn't in on, he didn't know. It seems like Reuben was out of the loop, and he didn't know whether or not he was really dead or not. And so Joseph, is being a picture, he is bringing restoration back to the family. And that word, tikkun is for restoration. It means, not only restore, but correct it. And the root of tikkun is the word tikkun, which means to measure up or weigh. And we think about, when are we going to have the tikkun halam, the restoration of this world? It comes when Mashiach comes, when the Yosef ben David, the Mashiach ben David comes again.
Jacob too was, I think, waiting and seeking some sign, to go into Egypt, because he didn't want to send Benjamin. He didn't want.
Yeah.
He only sent the brothers.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm thinking this.
She's talking about Joseph, Jacob staying in the land, and that he just sent the brothers.
You remember, because Laban deceived him so much.
Yeah, and why he didn't go down into Egypt at first is maybe because of Laban deceived him. Yeah, and he was thinking maybe a deception there. So I don't know.
Yeah,
but we do know that.
And Joseph knew that sign.
Yeah.
To put on the cart.
And to think about that, he wasn't blaming his brothers. That he's showing that I'm restoring. Yeah.
Because God.
And when you look at the word tikkun is spelled tav kuf nun, and the tav means a sign or a mark, like usually talking about the covenant. And then kuf means to surround, and then nun is the kingdom. So the word tikkun, in its form meaning, means the sign of the covenant is surrounding the kingdom. And so Joseph is the one that is bringing this tikkun. He's the one who's bringing the sign of the covenant that's surrounding the kingdom. He's the picture of the Mashiach. And, that Tav Kuf Nun is 400, 150, which is a total of 550, which is also the value of the word kaksir, which is a hired servant, which, what was Joseph? Joseph basically was a hired servant. He was the Mashiach who was going to bring this restoration. Well, Yeshua is a servant who is going to bring restoration. And that word kaksir is actually in Leviticus 25 and 40. And that's, and in Leviticus 25 and 40, it says, let me see if it'll go there. Yeah, Leviticus 25 and 40. And this is talking, yes, that rather you are to treat him like an employee or a tenant, and he will work for you until the year of Yovel, the year of Jubilee. So Shana HaYovel. So this hired servant, the Kaksir, he was going to work until the year of Jubilee. So, and think about, when Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, well, his brothers basically at this point had thought he was dead. He's alive. He's resurrected. He was dead to them, and now he's alive, standing before them, just as Yeshua was dead, and then he stood before his disciples, his Talmudim, after the crucifixion. And, remember, Joseph told his brothers, he says, come close to me, which is the same thing that Yeshua tells his disciples. He tells them, it's in Ephesians 2 and 13, he tells us that you who were formerly, far away, that we're made near, we're drawing close, we've come close to him through the blood. So, okay. So, and two, think about what Yeshua was supposed to do. He was supposed to bring restoration. In John chapter 11 and verse 49, it says, but one of them, Caiaphas, who was the Kohen Gadol that year, said to him, you people don't know anything. You don't see that it's better for you if one man dies on behalf of the people so that the whole nation won't be destroyed. Now, he didn't speak this way on his own initiative. Rather, since he was the Kohen Gadol that year, he was prophesying that Yeshua was about to die on behalf of the nation. And not for that nation alone, but so that he might gather into one the scattered children of Elohim. And so, Yeshua was going to bring about restoration between the two houses, which is what Joseph was to do. It was about bringing restoration between the two houses. Okay. If we go on to chapter 46, okay. Genesis 46 and verse 1. It says, Israel took everything he owned with him on his journey, and he arrived at Beersheba, and he offered sacrifices to Elohim, his father Yitzhak. And in a night vision, Elohim called to Israel, Yaakov, Yaakov. It's interesting that it says Israel, but then he turns around and calls him Yaakov. And he answered, Here I am. And he said, I am Elohim, the Elohim of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. It is there that I will make you into a great nation. Not only will I go down with you to Egypt, but I will also bring you back here again after Joseph has closed your eyes. So, Yaakov is given in this vision, he's told not to be afraid, and he's given this promise that he's going to return after Joseph closes his eyes. So, basically that's saying that you're going to die and Joseph is going to be the one to get the honor of closing his eyes there when he is. Yeah, he won't be left there. He's going to come back. Yep.
They'll be brought out of it.
Yep. Okay, so then let's go to verse 6. Verse 8. These are the names of Israel's children who came into Egypt. Yaakov and his sons. Okay. So as we go through the list here, we're going to count. So we're going to start counting. So the ones who went into Egypt, and we know that this is the counting of those who go, of descendants of Yaakov. So we're not going to count Yaakov. So we've got his sons. We start with Reuben, Yaakov's firstborn. And the sons of Reuben were Hanok, Palu, Hetzron, and Carmi. The sons of Shimon, Yumiel, Yamin, Ohad, Yachin, Zohar, Shaul, the son of the Canaanite one. The sons of Levi, Gershon, Kahat, Ma'ari. The sons of Yehuda, and Onan. We're not going to count and Onan for a reason here because they died. So Shelah, because they died, they didn't go down into Egypt. Shelah is 18. Peretz, Zedek, and then it says and Onan died in Canaan. Okay, so we're at 20. The sons of Peretz, we already counted Peretz, were Hetzron, that's 21. Hamul. The sons of Issachar is 23. Tola, 24. Pua, 25. Dov, 26. And Shimron, 27. And the sons of Zebulun, 28. 29. Seret, Elon, 30. Yaklel, 31. And these were the children of Leah, whom she bore to Yaakov in Padam Aram, and his daughter, that's 32. In some, his sons and daughters were numbered 33. But we just counted 32. Okay, so keep that in your mind. It says 33, but there were only 32 listed. We don't count and Onan because they died. Okay, so there's something missing here. Okay, so let's keep going. Verse 16. Then we had 32. The sons of Gad, that's 33. Zipion, 34. Haggai, Shuni, 36. Etzbon, Eri, Aradi, Areli. Okay, so that's 40. The children of Asher, 41. Yimnah, Yishva, Yishvi, Beriah, and sister Serach. Okay. And the sons of Beriah, which we just counted Beriah, okay, were Hever and Malkiel. So we're 48. These were the children of Zilpah, whom Laban gave to Leah, his daughter. She bore to Yaakov. And if you count those in that list, we had 33 all the way up to 48, that is 16 people. Okay. So we go to the next verse. So we left off, we have 48. The sons of Rachel, Joseph's wife. Joseph, well, we don't count Joseph because Joseph was already there. So 49, Benjamin. Joseph was in the land of Egypt, and born went to Joseph were Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Osnat, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, bore to him. The sons of Benjamin, which we just counted Benjamin, were Bela, so now we're 50, Bekir, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Achi, Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, Ard. So we're 59. These were the children of Rahel who were born to Yaakov, in some 14 people. So if we count the children here of Rachel, from we look at those, we actually have 14 people there. Okay. The sons of Dan, okay, so that brings us 60, Dan, were Hushim, the sons of Naphtali. So we count Naphtali, so we've got 62. We've got Yatziel, Guni, Yetzer, Shalim. These were the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave to Rahel, his daughter, and she bore to them, Yaakov, is 7 people. And so you count those, there's 7 people there. So how many do we stop at? 66. Okay, so we see here, there were 66 that we got, because Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim were already in Egypt. So look at verse 26. It says, all the people belonging to Yaakov coming into Egypt, his direct descendants, not counting the sons' wives, totaled 66. Did we get 66? Yeah, we just counted 66. Okay. So, but if we go back and look at the numbers, okay, in verse, where we go back up, where we had 32 instead of 33, we had 16, we had 11, but 3 of them were in Egypt. So 32, 16, 11, the missing 3 are in Egypt, plus we had 7 for the next one. Okay. So that gives us 66. Okay. Now, the sons of Joseph, verse 27, the sons of Joseph were born to him in Egypt, and there were 2 in number. Thus, all the people in Yaakov's family entered 70. Well, wait a minute. We just had 66. If we're counting Joseph and his children, so 66, we got Joseph, 67, and his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, 69. But it says that those that in Yaakov's family that entered Egypt were 70. But there's a difference, because remember, when we go back to verse 15, remember I said we had only 32, but it says 33.
Yeah.
So there is a missing person. Yeah, there's a missing person that has to be from Leah's descendants. Okay. And, it also, says there were 70. So when we look at that, there is the phrase, when we look at what it's talking about, when it says that Yaakov's family who entered Egypt numbered 70, the Hebrew word that's used there for entered is actually haba'ah. And it's the third person hofel conjunction or conjugation, which actually means to be brought in or to introduce. So that makes sense then, because Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh were already in Egypt. Okay, so it says the people that were introduced into Egypt were number 70. Okay. Now, if we go back to verse 7, yeah, so we are now, so we've got to be somebody else, and it has to be from Leah's descendants. It can't be from any of the other mothers because the numbers all add up on the other ones, just this one that doesn't add up. But if we go back to verse 7, this is the one I think holds the clue for us. Because if we go to Genesis 46, yes, and yeah, so if we go in verse 46:7, we've got sons, grandsons, daughters, and granddaughters, and all of his descendants he brought with him into Egypt. And we look at that in Hebrew, it is Benim and B'nai Benim, Banot, and Banot Benim. So it is plural. All of them are plural. Sons and sons are plural. Daughters, Banot, are plural. But wait a minute, daughters. Yaakov only had one daughter. Okay, so who are these daughters? Or remember how we talked before about a granddaughter is also called a daughter, like sons are okay. Okay, and remember that last week I touched on a little bit about the teaching of Dinah and her daughter, and about how there was the story of Dinah actually being the daughter of Asnat being the daughter of Dinah and Shechem. Okay. And that, that tradition. Well, if that is true, then that would make sense because she is counted in the list because she would have been a daughter. So that would make it plural. And so that would mean that Dinah and her daughter would also be counted in that list. So that would have been the missing person, and that would fit in with the lineage of being one of the ones from Leah's line and not of the other mothers. Prepared her, yeah. So yeah, a lot of the rabbis will say, yeah. Well, it could because we've got Moab, we've got Ruth being a Moabite. Well, because you remember they said that they felt like they didn't want the surrounding people to judge them with this young girl being pregnant and unmarried, that it would look like that she was a whore. And that's why they gave this daughter, the granddaughter, away to be raised. No, she did not marry him. No, she didn't. And so that's why, yeah. And so that's why, that was the reason for it, whether or not that's true. But if that is, then that makes sense why all the numbers then would line up. Now, if we go over, that's the only way they do line up. Yeah. Yeah. Now, some say, oh, well, they're counting Jacob himself. Well, but these are the lineage of Jacob, not his, is not counting from him. So why would you count it? Okay. If you go to the Brit Hadashah in Acts chapter 7 and verse 14, it says, Joseph then sent for his father Yaakov and all of his relatives, 75 people. So in the Brit Hadashah, it says 75, but in the Torah, it says 70. So where does the Brit Hadashah get the 75? It comes from the Septuagint. And remember, the Septuagint is actually a Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. Okay. And when you start looking at that, the Septuagint, which was written by rabbis later that were translating the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, some other rabbis say that they were referencing 75 because they were counting the children of Ephraim and Manasseh that came out too. And so in Numbers 26 and verse 35, it says the sons of Ephraim and their families were Shaltilach and the Mishpat of Shaltilach of Becher and Becher Tahan, and the sons of Manasseh, Ashriel, whom the Aramean concubine bore, and she bore Machil Gilead. And so there were 5 more. And so that's why that's why the 75 is referenced in the Septuagint, because that would have been added later on, because at this point they were counting the ones that were coming out, but then the rabbis went back and said, oh, well, let's add, Ephraim and Manasseh's children, if that is true. So, okay. When Yaakov arrives, Joseph, takes his brothers to see Pharaoh. So let's go to chapter 47. Okay, let's try to get my mouse to work. Okay, there it goes. Genesis 47 and verse 1. It says, and then Joseph went and told Pharaoh, my father and brothers have come from the land of Canaan with their flocks, livestock, and all their possessions. Right now they are in the land of Goshen. And he took 5 of his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. And so think about what's happening here. Joseph doesn't take all of his brothers and go into Pharaoh. He only is taking 5 of them. And, this got me to thinking about, well, wait a minute, why is he only taking 5 of them? And this is basically showing the wisdom that Joseph has. He's not, rabbis will say, oh, well, he wasn't wanting to overwhelm Pharaoh with them. But this also stuck out to me because, wait a second, being wise in 5, that these 5 brothers can represent for us the 5 wise virgins who had oil in their lamps. And, this could have been a tactic for Joseph only to take 5 of his brothers, so he didn't want to overwhelm Pharaoh. But he may have taken the brothers that he knew the ones that were the wisest and who wouldn't, pick a fight with Pharaoh or say something that would be disruptive, or say, get all, like some of them were very hot-headed. That they wouldn't do that, that these were the ones that he chose to took in there. We're not told which 5 he chose, but we do told that he took 5. And that, one picture, like I said, I see here is that Joseph is a picture of the Mashiach. And he's taking 5 wise ones to the king. Think about the parable of the virgins. Yeshua taking the 5 wise to the king. And then we see that, of course, that Joseph, arranges with Pharaoh for Goshen, that place that he's securing this dwelling place for his family, just as Yeshua secures a dwelling place for his family. In John chapter 14, in verse 1, he says, don't let yourself be disturbed. Trust in Elohim and trust in me. In my Father's house are many places to live. If there weren't, I would have told you, because I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And since I'm going and preparing a place for you, I will return to take you with me, so you will be where I am, and you may be also. And so, just as Joseph prepared a place for his family, Yeshua prepares a place for his family. Now, to end, I want to go to the Haftorah portion, because it's definitely related here. And it is in Ezekiel chapter 37. And in Ezekiel chapter 37, I'm going to go to verse 15 and start. It says, and the word of Yah came to me. And he said, you human being, take 1 stick and write on it for Yehuda and those joined with him, the people of Israel. Next, take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel who are joined with him. Finally, bring them together in a single stick so that they become one in your hand. And when your people ask you what all of this means, tell them that Yah Elohim says, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, together with the tribes of the people of Israel who are joined with him, and put them together with the stick of Yehuda, and make them a single stick so that they become one in my hand. And the sticks on which you write are to be in your hand as they watch. And then you are to say to them, Yah Elohim says, I will take the people of Israel from among the nations where they have gone and gather them from every side and bring them back into their own land. And I will make them in one nation on the mountains of Israel. One king will be king over all of them, and they will no longer be two nations. They will never again be divided into two kingdoms. They will never defile themselves with their idols and detestable things, or any of their transgressions. I will save them from all of the places where they have been living and sinning, and I will cleanse them so that they will be my people, and I will be their Elohim. And my servant David will be king over them, and all of them will have one shepherd, and they will live by my rulings, keep and observe my regulations. They will live in the land I gave to Yaakov, my servant, where your ancestors lived, and they will live there, their children and their grandchildren forever. And David, my servant, will be their leader for them. And I will make a covenant of peace with them, an everlasting covenant, and I will give them increase in numbers and set my sanctuary among them forever. My home will be with them, and I will be their Elohim, and they will be my people. So, in this Parsha, too, we see, well, practically in this Haftorah portion, we see actually Ezekiel's previous vision of the dry bones, and it represented the whole house of Israel. And then right after that, we're given this Haftorah portion, which is he's got this other vision of the two sticks, which depicts the same thing. The two sticks are representing the whole house of Israel being reunited and becoming one people, one nation of Israel, unified. And how are we to become unified? When the tribes show a love for the Father and his word, his Torah, and all of the jealousy and animosity between them are put aside. And like I said, so many prophetic pictures are revealed in this parsha, and it's about reconciliation with our brothers. And how can we portray Joseph so that he can be revealed? Well, we need to make sure that Benjamin, the son of the right hand, is there. And if we're exhibiting love and truth and Torah and being humble and reconciling with our brothers and drawing near to Yah, then I believe that, like Joseph, the Mashiach will present us like those 5 wives, brothers, just like Joseph did, that he will present us to the king, just as those, were being presented. And so it's about reconciliation. And, it's amazing how, Yah works it all out. I just started, I'm a reader, and I just started reading this book. It's not a new book, but it's a new book for me. It's actually called The Red Sea Spies by Rafi Berg. And it's the true story of the Mossad's fake diving resort in the 1980s off the Sudanese coast. They built this luxury diving resort, and the Mossad basically ran it. It was all secret, but it was all done in order to get out these group of people that were living in Africa that were Jews. Those that were surrounding them said they were Jews, and it was actually Ethiopian Jews, but the people around them said they were Jews. And this is what was interesting. And I just, started this, but I was reading, and it said here, the Ethiopian Jews were a devout community, and they considered themselves descendants of the Jewish people, who, according to tradition, stood at the foot at Mount Sinai and received the 10 Commandments. They conquered Canaan under Joshua and formed the kingdom of Solomon with its holy temple in Jerusalem. And until the latter part of the 19th century, they self-identified not as Jews. Now, the people all around them said that these people were Jewish, okay? And they were called Ayhud and Amrit, which is the Ethiopian official language. But they did not call themselves Jews. They self-identified as Beta Israel, or the house of Israel, because they considered themselves Israelites. But all the people that were around them in Africa were saying they were Jews because they ate kosher. They kept clean. There were certain traditions they went by. There were certain holidays that they did, and they were this remote group of people. And then, it ended up by, Israel coming, and there were some rabbis that came out there. They saw that, yes, they're doing all of these things. They're, holding to Torah, but by Israeli law, the right of return, they were not considered Jewish, because the Jewish law of return is that your mother or grandmother has to be a Jew. And they weren't considered Jewish. So, of course, they had to undergo conversion in order to be brought back. But it was interesting that this whole book is about the Red Sea spies, that they set up this secret operation of a diving resort in order to get all of these people out of Egypt. I mean, not Egypt, but Ethiopia. So it was really cool how y'all lined that up to where that's what I started reading at the same time that this Parsha is talking about reconciliation of the brothers, and realizing that the tribes are out there and they're hidden amongst the world. And that, here we are sitting here, looking to those around us as like we are Jews, but we are not Jews. And yet the same concept. We, by the law of return, would not be able to go to Israel. So that's, yeah. Hopefully, like I said, open your eyes to some of the prophetic pictures there. We're getting ready to do the blessing. And something you want to say?
Anybody have any questions or anything?
The law of return, that's the first time I've heard that.
That's the Israeli law of who has the right to live in the land. So it's called the law of return.
As a citizen.
As a citizen. Like
Okay,
it's unlike here. Like you can't just come across and just, you can go into Israel on a tourist visa. But you're guaranteed 3 months on a tourist visa, and then you have to leave. We were living there I had a B1 work visa, so it was tied to my work. So I got a renewal every year because of work. But other than that, if you didn't have a job there, you couldn't live there unless you did it illegally.
Yeah, and some people's done that. They've done that all the time. Some people have left their country and kind of just hid out in Israel a little bit. As long as somebody don't ask you for your identification or
but you could never leave. You could never fly.
You could never leave. Yeah.
But then again, you also had
to leave, but you wouldn't
get back in.
Come back.
And then you would also, you got to have a means of support.
Yeah.
If you're there illegally, because you cannot, unlike here, you can't get a job in Israel without paperwork. You have to have the paperwork. They don't, So, but that's what the law of return is. And so for you to be able to live in the land and to be a citizen, you actually have to have your grandmother on the maternity. They do it by the mother's lineage, not biblically on the father's line. So
y'all were living in the land and grew up on myself, and I had been walking downtown, and one of the Orthodox Jewish men run a shop at one day,
and Mom's just telling a story right now.
And he asked, and I've been there before, and I thought, yeah. But anyway, anyway, I was talking to a Jewish man that run a shop, and he said, he was asking me questions and stuff, and I told him, I said, yeah, I love it here, and I said, I'd love to live here. And he said, well, there's a way you can live here. Said, have you ever heard about, and then he said, you can convert to Judaism. He said, would you like to hear about that? And I said, I think I know about that. And I turned him off because, I deny Yeshua as my Lord and Savior. And I remembered that for every time I'd go, but I said, I could never do that,
Yeah. So, the only way really to, be able is, conversion if you're
Yeah.
not Jewish. So, that's
Yeah.
it. Okay,
Everybody
so
want to get ready.
we're
We'll
going
go
to
ahead
say
and
the
say the blessing. Yeberekaka Yahava Mirishmereha Yair Yahava Penava Eleka Vehuneka Yesayahava Penaveleka Vayashim Leka Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine on you and show you his favor. May Yahweh lift up his face toward you and give you peace. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Sar Shalom. Go in peace. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. So what's the day's date? Third, fourth?
well, before you go into that, and I just, for the recording, I'm going to go ahead and stop. And for those who are watching it later, until next time, we see you.